Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Hami and these are the headlines. The Pakistan Army says 3 soldiers have been martyred in a terrorist attack in the southwestern province of Balochistan. In a tweet, the military's media wing said 8 security officials were also wounded in the attack on the routine patrolling party. The global number of COVID-19 cases has crossed 13 million with more than 573,000 deaths. Brazil has reported 733 new fatalities, taking the toll to nearly 73,000. In the US, more than 60,000 tested positive overnight with a total of 3.3 million cases and over 135,000 deaths. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 50 more people have lost their lives to the virus, taking the toll to 5,320. Well, there are over 253,000 countrywide infections. Iran has reportedly dropped India from the Chabahar rail project, citing delay in funding from the Indian side. Officials say Iran will proceed without India's assistance to construct the rail line from the Chabahar port to Zahedan along the border with Afghanistan. The development comes as China finalizes a $400 billion deal with Iran, which could overshadow India's plans. At least 9 soldiers have been killed in the 3rd day of fighting between Azerbaijan and Armenia, despite international calls for restraint. Azeri Deputy Defense Minister said a Major General and a Colonel were among 7 of its deceased troops. Armenia's Defense Ministry also reported 2 casualties in the fighting. The Taliban have once again accused the Afghan government and the United States of violating the Doha peace deal. In a statement, the group said the US and the Afghan forces continue to carry out airstrikes in non-combat areas. Earlier, the US said the Taliban and Kabul administration have made progress on logistics for the intra-Afghan talks, but not on... Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. The Pakistan Army says 3 soldiers have been martyred in a terrorist attack in the southwestern province of Balochistan. The military's media wing said 8 security officials were also wounded in the attack on a patrolling party in the Panjgore district. It says 5 injured are critical. The injured soldiers have been evacuated to CMH Quetta. Now moving on to the COVID-19 pandemic, as the global number of infections has crossed 13 million with more than 573,000 deaths. Brazil has reported 733 new fatalities, taking the toll to nearly 73,000. In the US, more than 60,000 tested positive overnight with a total of 3.3 million cases and over 135,000 deaths. This report has the details.
Governments around the world are in a fix to open economies or reimpose restrictions as a powerful second wave of COVID-19 infects tens of thousands every day. In the virus epicenter Latin America, Mexico reported more than 4,500 new cases and close to 500 daily deaths. In the US, the most populous state of California has imposed restrictions on businesses and public spaces. Florida has followed suit amid surging cases in defiance of President Donald Trump's push for opening up. But the state stopped short of making face masks mandatory.
The message is, please follow the rules, maintain social distancing, wash your hands, don't touch your face with your hands, and if we all do that, then we can drive this contagion level down, we can stop the rise in the number of people going to the hospital, and then we can get back to normal much faster.
2 lawmakers in Madagascar have died after contracting COVID-19. The British government is making it mandatory to wear masks when they go into a shop from July 24th. The World Health Organization has warned that the pandemic will worsen if countries fail to take more decisive action.
Let me be blunt. Too many countries are headed in the wrong direction. The virus remains public enemy number 1. but the actions of many governments and people do not reflect of this. The only aim of the virus is to find people to infect.
In Asia, Malaysia and Singapore are set to ease border restrictions between the two countries to support essential businesses and official traffic. Meanwhile, Hong Kong's Disneyland is closing its gates again, less than 1 month after it reopened. South Korea's new virus cases have fallen back to below 40, while China has reported only 3 cases of coronavirus with no new infections in the capital, Beijing, for 8 straight days.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, the death toll from COVID-19 has surpassed 5,300 with 50 more fatalities in the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry says nearly 2,000 cases were reported overnight, with the tally crossing 253,000. Officials said more than 8,700 people recovered from the virus in the past day, with the total over 170,000. The ministry said there are more than 77,000 active cases in the country. It said the province of Sindh reported the most new infections with 1,089 cases. Punjab province reported 449 more infections, while the capital Islamabad registered 94 new cases. Iran has reportedly dropped India from the Chabahar rail project, citing delay in funding from the Indian side. Officials say Iran will proceed without India's assistance to construct the rail line from the Chabahar port to Zahedan along the border with Afghanistan. 4 years ago, the Indian government inked a deal with Iran to build the 628-kilometer long rail line. But now, Tehran has said it will use approximately $400 million from the Iranian National Development Fund. This comes as China finalizes a massive $400 billion deal with Iran, which could overshadow India's plans. The partnership will include Chinese involvement in Chabahar's duty-free zone, an oil refinery nearby, and possibly a larger role in the port as well. Opposition parties in India have called it a big loss for the country and questioned Prime Minister Narendra Modi's policies. The Taliban have once again accused the Afghan government and the United States of violating the Doha peace deal. In a statement, the group said the US and the Afghan forces continue to carry out airstrikes in the non-combat areas. The Taliban welcomed the reduction in foreign troop presence and the vacation of 5 bases by the US and its allied forces. Earlier, the US said the Taliban and Kabul administration have made progress on logistics for the intra-Afghan talks, but not on counterterrorism. In a statement, US envoy Zalmay Khalilzad urged the Taliban and Kabul to expedite the prisoner release and other commitments under the pact. In a related development, US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has discussed the situation in Afghanistan with Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. This follows a controversy regarding alleged Russian bounty for Taliban to kill Americans in the country. President Donald Trump's administration says US agencies have not corroborated intelligence that Russia paid Taliban to kill US troops. Russia has also denied the allegations. Earlier this month, House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi said Washington should impose sanctions on Russia's intelligence and defense sectors. The State Department said Pompeo also raised the issue of election security with Lavrov as the US readies for nationwide voting on November the 3rd. China says it will sanction US weapons manufacturing company Lockheed Martin over its latest arms sale to Chinese claimed Taiwan. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian said Beijing took the decision to safeguard its national interests. Zhao called on Washington to stop selling weapons to Taipei to avoid further harm to mutual ties and stability in the Taiwan Strait. This comes after the US approved a $620 million upgrade package for Patriot surface-to-air missiles for Taiwan. Meanwhile, Beijing says Washington's rejection of its maritime claims in the South China Sea is completely unjustified. Beijing's embassy in the US accused Washington of inciting confrontation in the region under the false pretext of preserving stability. Earlier, in an unprecedented move, the US rejected nearly all of Beijing's territorial claims in the area. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the world will not allow China to treat the energy-rich waters as its maritime empire. Pompeo said the US will stand with its Southeast Asian allies and protect their sovereign rights to offshore resources consistent with international law. Meanwhile, Japan has also accused Beijing to trying to alter the status quo in the East and the South China Sea under the cover of COVID-19 pandemic. At least 9 soldiers have been killed in the third day of fighting between Azerbaijan and Armenia despite international calls for restraint. The Azeri Deputy Defense Minister said a Major General and a Colonel were amongst 7 of its troops killed in the clashes. Armenia's Defense Ministry also reported 2 casualties in the fighting. The ex-Soviet republics have been locked in a conflict for decades over Azerbaijan's southwestern separatist region of Nagorno-Karabakh. The area was seized by ethnic Armenian separatists in 1990s war that claimed 30,000 lives. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called on the 2 countries to immediately stop fighting. In northern Syria, Russia says a roadside bomb detonated near a joint patrol with Turkey, injuring 3 of its soldiers and several Turkish troops. In a statement, the Russian Defense Ministry said the patrolling was called off following the explosion in Idlib province. The 2 countries agreed on a ceasefire and joint patrols in March, following weeks of clashes in Idlib. The area is the last major stronghold of rebels after 9 years of civil war. Libya's eastern-based parliament has approved a motion authorizing Egypt of direct military intervention in the country's war. The legislature backs warlord Khalifa Haftar, who has launched a military offensive to seize Tripoli from the UN-recognized government of Libya. Earlier, Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi said his country could send troops to Libya. Meanwhile, UAE has called for immediate ceasefire and inter-Libyan dialogue within international frameworks. But Turkey's Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu dismissed prospects of any imminent ceasefire in Libya. He said Sarat and Jufra air bases must be turned over to the GNA before it agrees to a truce. Jordan says Israel's plans to annex the occupied West Bank will dim hopes for a final settlement of the Arab-Israeli conflict. King Abdullah said the only path to lasting peace in the Middle East was the establishment of an independent Palestinian state. A palace statement said the king condemned any unilateral Israeli measure to annex lands in the West Bank. He warned annexation will fuel instability in the region. Jordan has led a diplomatic campaign along with many European countries that oppose Israel's seizure plans. In recent months, King Abdullah warned that Israeli policies, along with so-called US peace plan, devastate Israeli-Jordanian relations. In Lebanon, 14 rights organizations have accused the government of using repression and intimidation to crack down on dissent. The Coalition to Defend Freedom of Expression in Lebanon is comprised of international and domestic watchdogs, including Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch. The Coalition to Defend Freedom of Expression in Lebanon said more than 3,500 were interrogated on charges of defamation over the past 4 years. That is an average of about 2 people questioned per day, but just one of the country's main 4 security agencies. The Cybercrimes Bureau, the Lebanese Army, General Security and State Security also regularly interrogate and detain activists. New arrests spiked since October 2019 when the country witnessed its biggest ever mass protests. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Sudan has declared a state of emergency in the conflict-ridden western region of Darfur after escalating violence and unrest in 2 towns. The African Union UN mission in Darfur said it sent a team to Khartoum town following the reported burning of a police station by a mob. Eyewitnesses say an unidentified militia attacked a sit-in in Fatah Barno village on Monday, killing more than a dozen people. A day earlier, security forces violently broke up another protest camp in the region. The demonstrators called for better security conditions and an end to attacks by the government-sanctioned armed groups. State governor positions are held in Sudan by the military officers despite the toppling of autocrat Omar al-Bashir in April. In the U.S., 17 states and more than 200 universities are taking legal action against the Trump administration's new restrictions on international students. They argued that the policy compromises on student safety and forces institutions to reconsider new plans for the coming semester. The law says international students cannot stay in the U.S. if they can take all their classes online in the coming academic year. Universities have supported Harvard and Massachusetts Institute of Technology as they sued the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement in Boston. 17 states and the District of Columbia filed their own lawsuits, arguing that the rule is politically motivated. Other suits have come from Johns Hopkins University and the state of California. The U.S. Supreme Court has given the go-ahead to the first federal executions in 17 years. The top court overturned lower court order delaying execution of Daniel U.S. Lee after legal challenges to lethal injection. The Supreme Court said plaintiffs had failed to justify an unusual last-minute intervention by the federal court. The lower court had earlier ruled the use of a single drug could cause pain and may violate a constitutional ban on cruel and unusual punishment. The order was issued less than 7 hours before the execution of triple murder convict white supremacist Lee. Mexico has raised the number of people listed as officially disappeared in the country to over 73,000. The new government tally shows an increase of some 11,500 on the January count, underscoring the abuses since the country began its war on drugs. A quarter of missing are women, and tally includes over 12,000 children, most of them girls. Authorities say the disappeared mostly suffered crimes from kidnapping to homicide, while some are likely victims of sex trafficking and forced labor. The government said authorities and civil society have discovered over 6,600 bodies from mass graves since December 2006. Activists say Mexicans have disappeared at the hands of organized crime and the government, with the line between both entities often blurred. The United Kingdom has announced a ban on the purchase of Huawei equipment by Britain's telecom operators. The ban will take effect from the 1st of January next year. Speaking in the Parliament, Digital Secretary Olivia Dowden said it is the right decision for UK's economy and national security. He said new restrictions are also being applied to the use of companies' broadband kits by 2027. Responding, Huawei described the move as disappointing and threatened to move Britain into the digital slow lane and push up bills. In a statement, it urged the UK to reconsider the ban. The US had long pushed Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson to reverse a decision he made in January to grant Huawei a limited role in 5G. Washington claims Huawei poses a national security threat. North Macedonia is set to hold general elections tomorrow. Over 1.8 million people are eligible to cast their votes to elect a government for 4 years. Authorities say they have taken special measures at polling stations to prevent the spread of COVID-19. At least 1,500 candidates from 15 political alliances and parties are vying for a spot in a 120-seat National Assembly. The Social Democratic Party of Macedonia has been in power since 2017 in alliance with the parties of Turkish, Bosniak, Roman Ola and Serbian communities. 3 Turkish political parties are also participating in the elections. The country's European Union membership remained the top talking point in the lead-up to the polls. The United Nations says Pakistan has achieved the UN Sustainable Development Goal for protecting the environment and holding off climate change. The UN Development Programme said Islamabad attained SDG 13 well before the 2030 deadline. The bloc said it celebrated the milestone and the strategic partnership with Pakistan's Ministry of Climate Change. UNDP said it is crucial that to limit the increase in global mean temperature to 2 degrees Celsius or less. In a separate statement, the ministry said Pakistan has achieved a crucial milestone on the road to environmental protection. UN Sustainable Development Goals were adopted to address risks across economic, social, and environmental domains. In France, the government has agreed to give a pay raise worth $9 billion to health workers as it hailed their role in fighting COVID-19. The government signed a deal with trade unions after 7 weeks of fraught negotiations. Under the deal, the monthly pay of health workers will rise by some $207 on average. At the signing ceremony, France's new Prime Minister, Jean Castex, said it is a recognition of the frontline soldiers in the fight against COVID-19.
This is a historic moment for our health system. The state has cleared a budget of more than 8 billion euros for its health system, embodied by those who support it on a daily basis. That is to say, all the personnel, whatever their category, their establishment and their services.
The country will mark the day with a parade at the Place de la Concorde in Paris, where around 1,400 nurses, doctors and carers will watch as on guests of honor. Now moving on, the UN says COVID-19 could possibly push another 132 million people into chronic hunger by December. In a new news report, the bloc called on governments to adopt a set of policy tools to help people afford quality and nutritious food. The report says the pandemic is also contributing to an increase in obesity in poor populations which struggle to access nutritious food. The bloc said policies such as direct and indirect taxation that penalize food and agriculture production must be avoided. The report also urged low-income countries to revisit and increase subsidies in the food and agriculture sectors. In Italy, authorities have placed huge geotextile sheets over the Presena glacier to prevent or at least reduce the melting of the ice. The glacier near the northern town Trento is covered with 100,000 square meters of sheets meant to reflect the sunlight during the summer months. The massive cover has been laid down at an altitude of 3,000 meters and kept in place by sandbags. The sheets will be removed at the start of the skiing season when temperatures drop. The procedure is designed to combat the effects of global warming that have caused the Presena glacier to lose 1/3 of its surface in less than 20 years. A recent study says Britain is home to at least 100,000 modern slaves, 10 times more than the official estimate. A report by anti-slavery charity Justice and Care and think tank the Center for Social Justice warns 90% of the victims go undetected. The charity said actual number can be even higher and warned COVID-19 pandemic is likely to push more people into forced labor. The charity's chief executive, Christian Guy, said more work is needed to combat the issue. He said the landmark 2015 anti-slavery law created a false sense of security. Meanwhile, Home Secretary Priti Patel said her department will look closely at the report's findings. Patel said the UK is just getting started in its fight to rid this evil. Glamour, Glaze and Engineering Masterclass are on the show at the Bangkok International Motor Show, which opened today. The 12-day event will feature displays and demonstrations by major automakers. The event showcases thousands of vehicles from 35 car brands and 16 motorcycle manufacturers. The motor show will feature the Asia premiere of the much-talked-about limited edition Aston Martin Valkyrie. Organizers say the event is being held with all the necessary precautions amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Thailand has reported no domestic transmission in more than a month. Lows in the highs of the business world now. Croatia says it will need to wait at least 2 more years to participate in the European exchange rate mechanism. This was announced at the 6th session of the National Council for Introduction of Euro in the capital Zagreb. Finance Minister Darko Maric said the country can only enter ERM2 after meeting nominal Maastricht criteria. Maric said the 2-year period will allow Zagreb to prepare and fulfill these measures. Croatian National Bank Governor Boris Vučić said the central bank will supervise banks in collaboration with the European Central Bank. In Singapore, the economy has suffered a record contraction in the second quarter, tipping it into a recession for the first time since 2009. In a statement, the Ministry of Trade and Industry data says GDP in the city-state shrank by over 41% compared to the previous quarter. The ministry said Singapore's second quarter GDP shrank over 12.5% on a year-on-year basis. The contraction followed a first quarter year-on-year GDP fall of over 2% and quarter-on-quarter drop of over 10.5%. MTI forecasts it will be Singapore's worst recession since independence from Britain in 1965. To support its COVID-19 hit economy, the government has already pledged about $67 billion in stimulus measures. Wall Street stocks have slipped as investors digested a mixed bag of quarterly earnings from U.S. lenders. A dip in tech stocks led to the fall of the Nasdaq Composite Index. Largest U.S. lender JP Morgan Chase rose over 2%, following over 50% drop in second quarter profit. The losses in bank shares pushed the S&P 500 Banks Index down 1%. Chevron and ExxonMobil contributed to the Dow's gains, jumping over 2% each. Meanwhile, oil prices dropped nearly 2% on worries of new clampdowns on businesses to stem surging pandemic cases. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.